Good afternoon, everyone. I'm now going to finally get around to trying to get this GE, Made in Canada GE working. Now let me just show you what it's doing, and then I'll tell you what my approach is, and then we'll come back once I'm actually starting to work on it. So we're in AM. We can turn around, and the sound is distorted, but seems to be working. So highly distorted, but working. If we go to FM, we see the same thing. And turning the AFC on suggests that it does work. You can see that the station stays in for a longer turn of the dial. So what does that suggest? That suggests to me that the tuning sections in this radio are working. The question is really has to do with the amplifier section. And what I'm hoping is that the problem is very likely in the capacitor that connects the volume knob to the through to the amplifier section. That seems to be a fairly common failure, and the radios are very sensitive to that. So that's the first thing I'm going to replace, and then we'll take it from there and sort of walk through that circuit. If we open up the radio, you can get a look as to what that is going to look like here. Get a flashlight, might help. So this, I think, is the output section here. There are a couple of capacitors that are black, and I do wonder if some have been replaced over the years. Although most of this doesn't look like it's been taken apart. So there'll be a capacitor that goes from the volume knob here through into that. This is probably a power capacitor that 500 microfarad probably could be replaced. And then, that's mostly it. There aren't actually a lot of electrolytics in this, so the temptation to just replace them all is going to be fairly high. But the problem is some of them are on these little subboards, which I don't think are cut out underneath, so those would be difficult to get at, which actually makes me think that this one is original. So I'm assuming that one of these two here, if you look at the flashlights over blowing out the image, one of these two here would be what I will probably try to replace first, and then we'll go from there. I don't have a schematic for this radio, so I'm working blind in that regard. I like this radio a lot, and I'm going to be very careful about anything I do with it. But it's, this is probably quite early 60s. I mean, the lunchbox design feels very 50s in some ways. But, and we've got only English. Well, we wouldn't have French on everything till the 70s. But yeah, open air capacitor, right? 2-gang open air capacitor. So, not expecting magic out of this in terms of sensitivity, but there's a, pretty significant bar antenna. It's very nicely built. So, yeah, so I'm going to try to take the board out. It looks like it's held in place by 1, 2, there might be some under there, 3, 4, probably 5, 6 screws. And we'll see where that takes me. So I'll come back with that. I've taken out all the screws. This one over here underneath the antenna was difficult, but fortunately the plastic on this is still, or rubbery plastic, or rubber, whatever it is on this is still, that holds the bar antenna here was still flexible enough that I could push this out of the way to get my 1/4-inch driver in. I guess I could take this off. Although I am a bit concerned about the hinges here, so this may go right back on. No, this is going right back on. Breaking these hinges here would be catastrophic. This case is so nice. Oh, you know what? I do have to get it off though. Okay. We'll just have to be very careful. Okay, so this should come out, I think. Okay, something is still causing an issue. Is there another screw? Not that I can see. This end is definitely out. Well, we can take this off here. All right, there we go. There's the board. Okay, well, I'm going to try to figure out a way of doing this without damaging any of these wires, and then I will come right back and we can see where we are. So one thing I note when I look at this is that a lot of this soldering doesn't look, you know, I mean, I'm sure it's fine, and it is mostly working, but a lot of this doesn't look great. Yeah. So one of the things that's definitely going to have to be done with this is running an iron over all of these, pretty well every connection back here. I also note that we've got a break in the board right here, and that's affecting two tracks. That could be our problem right there. I don't know where those tracks go, but I'm seeing a transformer. So that's in the output stage. Yeah. So that's my first, that's going to be my first thing. Sorry, you can't really see that here. I'll slide the camera over. So what and zoom in. I can't slide the camera much more. I don't want to move this because it's precariously balanced on solder and C batteries at the moment. So what we've got here is that this, that's better pointing tool. And so what we've got here is so this track is broken. That will be easy enough to fix. And we have this track is broken, and that will be easy enough to fix. And then I'll probably just put a little bit, or maybe even before I do that, I'll just put a little bit of glue in this little crack to hold things in place. I think that's the first thing I'm going to fix. So I will find some wire for bodging and some super glue and try that. What I've done over here is put a little bit of super glue on the crack. I've held it, it's now holding. I'm going to wait for it to dry completely. While I was holding that, I had a look over here very carefully using side light like this, because my light is coming from this side. I wanted to be able to look over here. And I'll slide the camera down again so you can see. But most of these solder joints actually look fine once you look at them closely. I mean, some of this stuff, these voids, things are bent over. It's like a different standard of construction than I think what we would expect today. And this is all working, so I will probably, after I feel that the radio has been repaired, probably go through and touch up some of these that I don't like. But I think they're probably not as bad as I was first thinking. So the goal here is going to be to fix these traces and then try it and then see where that takes us. So I will pause and then get to that. Now I put on my two botch wires, one here, one sort of snaking around here. These aren't pretty, and normally I like to have them follow the path of the original wire more, but this isn't the RF section, this is audio, it's probably okay. And this little crack is mostly taken care of, so I'm going to let that finish, the glue finish drying there, and then we'll try the radio and see if this in fact repaired it. I've touched up a few you can't see, but down over here I've touched up a few of these solder joints. I'm thinking I'm going to leave the rest of them alone for now, and we'll see how it goes. One thing I do looking at this big board with its chunky pads is I do wish I put a larger tip on the soldering iron before I got started, but I didn't. One thing that's interesting looking at the back of this board is that you can see how they've built ground planes in. What's interesting, it's got these sort of little bits out of it, but these sort of look like ground planes, and they go underneath where some of those little subboard assemblies go on. So that's providing some RF shielding there. Like this, I think, is mostly the FM section. So now the radio is back in position. Just to show you where the spot on the board that I glued is right there. Sorry, my arm's in my left hand. The is right here. It's this corner, and so it's around this audio. That's probably the audio output transformer, I would think. So presumably that could be one of our causes of problems here. So let me get the batteries in. There are a few sort of homemade repairs on this radio, so someone put that little bit of, I don't think that's original, and then there's some tape on the back of the speaker. Someone was concerned with battery rattling against it at some point in its lifetime. So it's possible someone tried to take it apart, over-tightened it, or who knows. Or the batteries rattling around knocked the board, but it's hard to imagine that they would on this side. So that's not clear to me what could have caused that break. Okay, so let's, the moment of truth. Okay, let me see if I can tune.
In her poetry, the 74-year-old Olivia Harrison opens up about the grieving process.
David Bowie fame on
So the radio's fixed. It's working. I'm still tempted to replace capacitors while I'm here, but I'm not going to. I'm going to put the radio back together, and if I decide it needs more work later on, I will do it. But there's an obvious problem. It was really very easy to fix. You know, I took the opportunity while that glue was drying to clean up the knobs better than I typically do. One of the things that sometimes gets me about old radios is grossness in the knurling on the knobs, so that's fixed. So what I'm going to do is put this back together, and then I'll come back and we'll try it out and see how it does. So the radio is back together. I screwed everything in with a fair amount of care. This is the little cable routing grommet, I guess I'd call it. I put the Made in Canada sticker back where it originally was. You could tell because there was the impression of the bottom line of this printing on it. I found it down in here, but that's where it belongs. The model number is on this sticker here. I'll show you up here. Model R1 R52 Made in Canada. This is just to cover the bottom which gives you the original, the US address for GE in New York. So they put the Made in Canada sticker over that. So I will put these batteries back in. we'll close it up and let's have a listen to how this works. I've shut off the soldering iron, which interferes with AM, since these fairly basic soldering stations tend to use essentially a dimmer circuit to allow you to adjust the heat. I really quite like that, but there we go. So there's the GE radio. Let's put it on AM first. Let's turn it on. Well, let's go down to the bottom of the band. Let's turn it on.
A&M beat them last year. That was Alabama's blemish on their regular season schedule, was losing. With women's rights and women's sports in this fashion. Susan Morgan, a co-producer of the movie.
Right now, celebrating in their color and glamour all along.
On knew all arguments were useless.
Oui, puis la...
Nobody was there, so
It's not super hot on AM, but it's pulling in all the local stuff just fine.
Thrilling possibilities. Every Weber Genesis includes City Pass.
You can hear it picking up all the noise from the computer and, you know, the light and all the stuff around here.
Buenas tardes. Yo pensé que me iba a prestar la guitarra.
Okay, so that's pretty good. So let's look at FM. We'll take AFC off.
Someone jump for me, jump for me, jump for me. You're Toyota, so stop dreaming and start driving.
I don't have the antenna up. Again, for local stations in Toronto, it'd probably pull them in fine without it, but
Donate online at jazz.fm.
it's in alignment on FM.
FM 91 Music and Events.
The TV.
So, pretty sensitive FM receiver, seems to be a perfectly adequate AM receiver. Obviously, this is at my desk with electronics everywhere, so not necessarily the best spot, especially during the day. If you shut everything off at night, that's not, you can do a little DXing on AM from here. But I'm very happy with the repair of this radio. That turned out to be very easy. I bet, you know, you could align it, but frankly, it doesn't sound like it's terribly out to me, and that's a little bit outside my comfort zone, so I'm not going to try. There would also possibly be something to be said for replacing the capacitors in it, the electrolytics. There would be 3 that I can get at fairly easily. And those could be done. The other one could be ripped off the front of the board and replaced. But it's working, and I'm really reluctant to do anything else that might break it. I think this is working really well, and it will certainly get into my rotation as a radio that I use. Well, thank you for watching what turned out to be a quite simple repair of the Canadian-made GE lunchbox radio from, it's got to be the early 60s, right? Open air, tuning condenser, lunchbox style, gigantic volume pot. I mean, it's almost made like a tube radio inside in some ways. So I would say this is early 60s. As I said, I haven't been able to find this model. I'll look farther if I can, but it's working. It's pretty nicely made, I think, and I'm very happy to have it. So thanks for watching.